We went to sabotage a fox hunt. They weren't hunting foxes. Written by huntalex. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. I remember when the first time I saw something die. A squealing hair limbs twitching, eyes wide ripped apart by whippets in the village green of Norfolk. I was only a 6-year-old boy. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't do anything to help the creature. Just watched the group of men cheer as fresh blood soaked the hedgerows. That moment rewired something in me. Since then, I've spent my life pushing back against the cruelty of blood sports. Anything from badger baiting, stag coursing, and of course illegal fox hunting. Now I was behind the wheel of a rusted van rattling down narrowing country lanes, the kind that twisted like veins through ancient woodland. GPS had given up 10 miles back. The trees grew taller here, ash, yew, and hazel, forming arches overhead that blocked out the late autumn light. A strange quiet settled, the kind you only notice when you've lived too long in cities. In the back were the crew. Sophie, sharp-tongued, fierce-eyed. She'd grown up in inner-city Wolverhampton, got into animal rights after her dog was poisoned by her neighbor. Once smashed a grouse shooting estate's window with a brick wrapped in a wildlife trust leaflet. Nick was quiet, ex-army. His 1,000-yard stare never left him, but out here in the green among the brambles and birdsong, he came closest to looking human again. This work sabotage resistance was his therapy. Tom was youngest, barely 23. He came from a long line of country folk. His grandfather ran fox hunts in Yorkshire. Tom once helped flush out a vixen when he was 16 and had nightmares about it for years. He joined us out guilt, maybe, or because he believed redemption was real. We rounded the bend and the village emerged. Harlow's Hollow. A pocket of time untouched by modernity. The houses were stone and ivy-choked, roofs slanted and sagging with centuries of rain. There was no signal, no streetlights, and no traffic. Just a creeping mist and a church bell that rang at the wrong time. A hand-painted wooden sign read, "Welcome to Harlow's Hollow Treadlight. Walk right." We slowed as we passed a crumbling war memorial and a small schoolhouse with boarded windows. 2 boys played football barefoot in the mud beside it. They stopped as we passed and stared, silent, unsmiling. "Feels off," Sophie muttered. "It's like stepping into a 17th century painting that doesn't want you in it," said Tom. We parked beside the only pub in town, the Broken Heart, its sagging roofline leaning as if trying to collapse on itself. A pub sign swung in the wind, a red stag with its belly slashed open. Inside, the smell of beer vinegar and wet stone hit us first. James was already seated at a far table by the fireless hearth. He looked like the land itself, deeply creased, sun-beaten, carved out of earth and bad luck. He didn't rise when we entered, just raised a hand and gestured us over. "You're the saboteurs?" he asked in a low, gruff tone. "Yeah," I said. "You're James?" He nodded. "They're hunting again in a few days' time, but this time it ain't no fox they after." We sat. Ordered pints. The barmaid said nothing, eyes flicking to our boots, our gear. A man at the bar was carving something into the wood with a penknife. A fox? A man? It was hard to tell. Nobody smiled. Nobody spoke. Above the hearth hung a tattered watercolor painting. At first glance, a standard fox hunt rider's, dogs, the blur of red coats. But when you looked closer, the figure being hunted didn't look vulpine, though, more humanoid. Later, when the place emptied, James leaned in. The firelight caught the lines of his face. "They've taken children before," he said. "Always made it look like runaways. Accidents. But I know what I saw." Sophie frowned. "Who's they?" "The Darrow family, and the Hollow Hunt. Lord Darrow and his inner circle. Been doing it for centuries." He took a deep swing from his pint, shaking his head. "Foxes, at least, keep the rabbits from eating my cabbages. These bastards. They run hounds through my pastures, kill my sheep, piss on my fences like they own everything." Sophie slammed her glass down. Why hasn't the village stopped them? How can you people let these sick fucks get away with this? James's eyes narrowed. Because they're afraid. Because they remember. Then they told us the folktale. Passed down in dark corners and unfinished verses. The weird was once a man, or something like it. A keeper of balance between man and beast. When men pushed deeper into the wolds, clearing, killing, claiming, the forest struck back. Until the Darrows made a pact. Give the weird a child, let him be raised wild, become a part of the woods, and then hunt him. A ritual sacrifice. To show the forest man still had dominion, each successful hunt won them another generation of safety, harvests, and control. He paused. My son, 3 years ago. He was 6. Vanished. They said he wandered off into the woods. But I found his coat. Torn. Just lying in the middle of the path. James took us to his land, a mile outside the village, past a rusted gate and into a hollow glade. There were signs here, subtle but mistakable. Stones stacked in spirals. Bones tied with black twine. Effigies nailed to trees, half man, half beast. He's out there still, James said, pointing to the tree line. They call him the Redling now. You can see him at the edge of the woods, just watching. We made camp in his converted tool shed, maps and photos on the walls, printouts and Polaroids pinned with nails. Scribbled notations. Bloodstains on an old Darrow crest. The air smelled of damp paper and cold steel. That night, by the crackle of a makeshift fire, we shared our stories again, deeper this time. I told them about the hare in Norfolk. Sophie told about the time she stopped a badger-baiting ring somewhere in South Derbyshire and got glassed for it. Nick said nothing for a long time, then murmured, Kandahar was easier than this place. Tom stared at the fire. If they raised him wild, what does this mean? Does he still think like a person? James answered, You'll see, if he let you. And just as we settled into the silence, I saw him. In the dark woods, small, pale, draped in a fox pelt, eyes glowing faint ember. He didn't blink, just watched. The morning broke not with the sun, but with a pale light pushing through a heavy veil of mist. Dew clung to the hedgerows of spindle and hawthorn like sweat on fevered skin, and the ash trees stood as gray silhouettes, sentinels in mourning. There I stood at the edge of the kitchen garden, cradling a mug of black coffee, watching a pair of jackdaws peck at the remnants of seeds scattered on the path. In the distance, an old woman moved through the fog towards the woodland. Others joined her quietly, emerging like ghosts on the moor, men and women placing small offerings at the wood's edge. A freshly shot wood pigeon, feathers still damp with blood, a brace of rabbits, a wedge of cheddar cheese, strawberries, and a wicker basket of pink lady apples. One man laid what appeared to be a wooden carving of a fox, weather-worn but clearly treasured. At that moment I felt it, the land holding its breath. They're leaving offerings. It was James, having gotten up earlier to work on the farm before everyone else. For the Redling, no doubt. Why are they feeding him? I whispered. Because some think he's still a boy, others think he's a god. And maybe they're both right, James answered. That afternoon, the group fanned out for recon. We took turns watching the hunting lodge in the beach hangar above the village. Hidden behind gorse and brambles, Sophie and I lay flat in the grass, binoculars on the sprawling estate. There, over several yards, we got the picture of what we were dealing with. Hunting lords and their sycophants, a string quartet playing Waltz of the Flowers, champagne flutes in one hand, riding crops in the other. A bonfire crackled on in the center of the fête champêtre as servants wondered, offering hors d'oeuvre. The fact these people were enjoying themselves at this meet, likely anticipating the idea of a human child being torn to shreds for some twisted ritual, sickened me to the stomach. Then came the hour of the man itself. the devil in velvet hunting coat, lifting his drink as the fire crackled. Lord Robert Darrow, a slender man in his 70s with silver hair, a thin hawk-like nose, and a haughty tone. The type you often seen in some snobby elite club. "To the old ways," he cried. "To dominion, to the weird that bends the wood and blood." The crowd cheered. Snippets of conversation followed, coded, careful. "He's ready now. Been seen by standing stones. Another year, another offering?" Same line. Always the same methods. Back at the farmhouse, Sophie paced furiously. "This isn't hunting. This is a fucking cult. They really going to sacrifice a child for some folkloric bullcrap?" Nick was busy tinkering with one of his radios while Tom was researching hacked documents. "Me. I was watching out the window. I swore the Redling was out there watching me in return. He knows we talking about him." Sophie slammed her fist onto the table, her voice now crackling with frustration. "Why hasn't the village done anything to stop this? How can you all let this happen? Your own child is going to die. And for what? Some folkloric bullshit?" James slowly looked up. "Because they think we're nothing." He rose, leading to the mantel. "To those bastards, we're filth. Bumpkins. Can't tell a hedgehog from a hairbrush. That's what Darrow called us once. And we believed it. Or at last we were scared enough to act like we did." Silence. "I know my son's out there," James said softly. "Michael probably doesn't remember who he is. Doesn't know who his father is. Just waiting for this brutes and those mangy mutts to tear him to pieces like fucking Christmas wrapping paper. And one will do nothing about it." James takes a deep breath. "That's why you lot are here. To help me put a stop into this madness. I don't give a shit at this point if I get killed. Or magical nature spirit gets pissed at us for not giving it what it wants. This needs to end." Nick finally spoke up. "Then don't call the police for help, or even contact the neighboring counties." James scoffed. "Yeah, brilliant, mate. Hello, police. I like to report a fox hunting cult kidnapping kids and sacrificing to a pagan god. Who's going to believe us?" Joe picked something plushy from the mantelpiece. A soft fox plush, a bit tattered from old age but holding its endearing charm. "I don't care if I lose 1,000 lambs to the foxes. I don't care I lose the farm or get hung for treason by the village. I just want my son back." He stared into the glassy eyes of the stuffed animal, and I swore I could see a stray tear. This bloody little thing. This was Michael's favorite toy. He called it Todd. Ironic, honestly. I hated foxes, yet he adored them. They were his favorite animal. The next day was full of small unease. Shrines found along the tree line, bones and woven brambles. A trail camera of Tom knocked over and snapped in half. "Those toffee-nosed bastards," Tom murmured in frustration. We discovered a hidden clearing behind a blackberry thicket where villagers have formed a crude circle of dried flowers, candles, and charred wood in the center. Nick had a good idea what it meant. The following night, we watched the hunting lodge again. The party grew more rowdy. Music drifted over the fields, distorted by wind and fog. I caught Lord Darrow in my view once again standing by the fire, now with a grotesque pelt of a victim of his fox hunts draped over his shoulders. He spoke again to his followers. "In 2 days will the child of beasts of prey run. The land will be reminded who holds the whip. And once again Mother Nature will kneel to her masters." We listened to the rhythm of the woodland as we sat on the porch, planning our move on the hunt. James joined with Todd cradled in his arms like a newborn baby. "We need to act first." James sat directly. "This isn't just Michael or bloody foxes anymore, but many children to come before us." The autumn fog thickened like porridge, curling around the farmhouse like smoke. I couldn't sleep that night. I came to this village to help put an end to fox hunting, only to dragged into a conspiracy. Once I finally succumbed to fatigue, I dreamt. I dreamt of running through the eaves and underbrush with roots like bare-knotted fists. Behind me, a pack of hellish dogs with red eyes and frothing maws snapping at my heels. Ahead, The redling at the edge of the woods, staring at me with bright amber eyes, and whispered, "Would you bleed to stop them?" I snapped out of my nightmare, only to see a fox staring out of my window. Once it noticed I was awake, the beast trotted back into the thickets. What does this all mean? The first sound was a bird, a male blackbird trilling from the hedgerows. His voice was brittle, glass-bright against the dull hush of the early morning, soon joined by the squeals and grunts of James' neighbor's panage pigs set loose to echo among the acorn-rich underbrush. On I sat by the window, tea cooling in his hands. He hadn't slept much that night. None of us had. The night had been thick with half-seen shapes, the woods creaking like old bones. Somewhere past midnight, even the local barn owl had fallen silent. Then came the robin and its autumn song. It perched on the windowsill, puffed red breast bright the gray, head cocked as though listening. James noticed it at first. "That's a sign," he muttered. "Old folks say robins carry messages from the dead, from the spirit world." The little bird let out a single note, sharp and strange, then flew off toward the edge of the trees. "Well, I think Mr. Redbreast wants us to follow him," Sophie said, already grabbing her coat. "I know when not to ignore a guide when one shows up." No one questioned her. In Harlow's Hollow, too many things weren't coincidence. We followed the robin deep in the woods, fluttering to branch, sometimes waiting patiently for us to keep up, past the place where the offerings have been left the day before. Many are now gone or slowly decaying from the elements. As we tread, we could hear pheasants clattering through the underbrush. A hedgehog, perhaps returning home from a late night of hunting, waddled across our path. The stillness was shattered by a sudden rustle, and there he was. Michael, the redling. The young boy half-shrouded in the morning mist near an ancient yew, a shape out of time. He wore the same fox pelt draped over his shoulders, matted with burrs and dried leaves. His eyes, humans, yet not, met mine without fear. Sophie stepped forward slowly, crouched low. "Hey there, sweetheart. It's okay." The boy's head tilted. Then, with an uncanny quickness, he dropped to all fours and bolted. But not away. He circled them. Joining him from out from the undergrowth were foxes, badgers, stoats, weasels, and even a polecat. Low and silent like a predator testing a herd. Nick whispered, "He's not just a kid anymore." "No," said James, voice raw. "He's been out in the woods for far too long. And those monsters made him into this." His knuckles whitened. "My son. That's my bloody boy." A stunned silence followed. The air grew colder. Rooks cawed overhead. The forest was listening. James stepped forward slowly, voice shaking like old timber. "Michael, son, it's me. Your father." The boy flinched. His eyes, feral golden, blinked uncertainly. "Do you remember? Your name is Michael Corbin. You lived on a farm with me. You used to love reading Rupert Bear, playing football with your mates, and you loved foxes. Even I didn't. You have a little fox named Todd back home. You wouldn't sleep without him. He misses you." The redling tilted his head. A breath caught in his throat, but he said nothing. "I looked for you," James whispered. "I never stopped. I'm sorry I let those horrible people take you." The redling tilted his head at James. A rather protective sow badger snarled at the sheep farmer to keep away from the redling. "I couldn't believe what I saw." Michael calmed her by a quick kecker. "Incredible," Nick whispered. "Your son is a real-life Mowgli now." "Yeah, bloody hell, son," James muttered. But before we could move closer, a crack rang through the air. A branch snapped somewhere nearby. A hiss of movement. Then came the smoke. Michael's animals scattered into the undergrowth. A veil of oily vapor moved closer. A track rang through the air. A branch snapped somewhere nearby. A hiss of movement. Then came the smoke. Figures emerged from the smokescreen, tall, masked, and silent. The hunters. Their faces were hidden behind grotesque masks of bone and hide, like beasts born of nightmare. One held a long shepherd's crook, another a net. Michael shrieked. Then chaos. Sophie hurled a smoke flare, painting the world crimson. Nick tackled one of the men to the ground. Got one. Tom scrambled through the smoke, grabbing Michael's arm, but something yanked the boy back. A steel trap disguised under leaves clanged shut beside his feet. The hunters surged forward. James tried to run, shouting for his boy, but I grabbed him back by the collar, having seen through those hunters' games. Don't, it's a trap. Michael was dragged, kicking and howling, into his metal cage set in an old, rusted trailer behind a covered quad bike. The hunters vanished into the smoke, their prize in tow. The cock robin returned. He flitted around James's head, then darted after the fleeing cage, its trilling call like a warning. Tom and Nick threw the bound cultist onto the kitchen floor. The man's mask now cracked. He was no rural villager. His accent was posh, his clothes too clean beneath the grime. "You're not from here," Sophie growled. "Well, aren't you a clever little chav?" The man sneered. "Does it matter? It's too late." I stepped closer, now intrigued what this ruffian had to say. "So you can keep pretending you lot own the land?" The cultist smiled wider, clearly indulging in our frustration. "We don't pretend. We remember the old ways, before your lot came with the cameras and flares. We know the power beneath the soil, even better than those imbecilic locals." "Then why hide behind your smoke screens?" Tom snapped. "What? You think you lot were the first to try and sabotage our rituals?" The man hissed. "We gotta keep you fools on your toes." After securing the snob in one of James's rooms for the night and giving him something to eat, we're not heartless, we retired for the night. Tom, Nick, and Sophie, battered and exhausted, were the first to hit the sack, leaving me alone with poor James. Poor bloke, having to reunite with his son only to be stripped from him once again. They really going to do it? The ritual. My son. The hunt's legacy. But not this time. I don't care if the wild swallows my farmstead whole. I don't care if wolves magically appear from the other world. I'm getting my son back or I'll die trying. From the woods came a sharp bark of a fox. And then silence. I jolted awake just past midnight, realizing I dozed off in my chair. The dying embers of the fireplace now smoldered. The wind had stopped. The cock robin sat perched on the back of my chair, watching me with its jet-black eyes. Then from the woods came a sound unlike any I'd heard before. A scream. Half human, half animal. Michael. Being changed. And soon the hunt will begin. Rain pattered lightly on the windows of the old stone farmhouse, casting long streaks across the glass like claw marks. Inside, the flicker of candlelight danced on the wooden beams. A faint, musty smell of damp earth and livestock clung to the air. Sam Bedford, our captive, stayed tied to a chair in the center of the room, soaked, shivering, but still smirking. Nick leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I paced. I couldn't help myself. Tom fiddled with a worn hunting knife, the tension bleeding from his fingers. Sophie sat stiffly, trying not to glare at the prisoner. James remained in the corner near the hearth, Todd in his hands. "You know what we're here for," Joe said. "Tell us what the hell is going on." Sam chuckled, lips split where someone had struck him. "You lot don't understand what you're interfering with. This isn't some posh countryside game. This is tradition. This is balance." James's voice crackled like dry timber. "My son was kidnapped, to be used like a sacrificial lamb for your little pagan cult. Balance?" He took a step forward. "You don't know the meaning of it." Sam turned his gaze on him. "The weird took what it was owed. You should be grateful it didn't take more." Having enough of this nonsense, I slammed my fist on the table. "The weird? Enough of that fairy tale bullshit?" "It's not a fairy tale," Sam whispered. "It's older than belief. Older than your churches, your cities, your paved roads. The rid is the forest. It's the rot and the regrowth. It gives and it takes. We just obey. Sophie's eyes narrowed. You obey by kidnapping children? Sacrificing them to beasts and running through with hands? Sam smiled again. We prepare them. They become something more. Guardians, vessels. They shed their humanity so we don't have to. That's sick, Tom muttered. Sam ignored him. Every redling was once a child, released into the forest. The weird watches them. If they survive until the hunt, they are blessed. If they die, they are still given as tribute. That's the agreement. Nick stepped forward now, his voice quiet but fierce. My dad was a terrier man. Fox hunts were our life. I get traditions. I get the land. But this is twisted. Even he'd never be part of this. Sam looked at Nick with something like pity, because he was blind as a mole to what the hunt really was. Later their evening, after Sam had been locked in the stable under watch, the group returned to the farmhouse kitchen. A bottle of whiskey was passed around, but no one drank much. The silence was heavy. I never told anyone the truth, James said finally. His voice was raw. Not even the police. Everyone looked up. My twin brother, Luke, he was the first one I saw taken. I was 6. The last time I saw him was in the woods behind the old vicarage when the horns sound. The hounds came first, screaming, barking. Then the riders, masks, red coats, blood on their coats. My face tightened. Sophie leaned in. They grabbed him, took him. I remember my mother screaming, and I remember the forest swallowing him whole. That was the last time I saw. The room was silent but for the crackle of the fire. Sophie placed a hand onto the farmer's. We'll get him back, she whispered. I promise. The next morning came with a light drizzle. Today was devoid of birdsong. Sophie stepped outside, blinking against the fog. Something darted at the tree line low, quick and red. A flash of red. A little warbled passage with several drawn-out fading notes. Mr. Redbreast's gone off again, Sophie muttered half to herself. Well, I think he wants us to follow. I joined her, rifle slung over the shoulder. You really believe he's leading us somewhere? I don't know, she said, but I've got a feeling. Nick spotted it first. Torn feathers, a fresh mallard near the trees left on a flat stone. A gift or a warning? Further in, the group found relics, half-buried masks, wicker cages, carvings in ancient stones, glyphs of man-beast hybrids with thorns for crowns. Tom reached for one, only to recoil. Still warm. The forest called to him. It always had, but now it sang to his blood. No matter how he tried to break free of his iron containment, no matter how he tried to chew at the bars. Michael was not a boy anymore, not in body or mind. He moved like mist through the trees, muscles and fur and instincts. The hound's scent lingered on the wind, and it made his skin prickle. He remembered a time, vaguely, when he'd had a name. A toy. A voice that read stories in a soft country drawl. A garden with carrots and tomatoes. A dog barking cheerfully. Now those memories were flickers, scattered like bird bones. The others, the hunters, were nearby. He could smell their sweat and smoke. Their new methods. Some carried smoldering urns that cast thick plumes, choking the undergrowth. Some laid false trails. Some had bagged foxes to let them loose and blood the hounds. The redling hated them. He remembered the fear. He remembered being dragged from somewhere that's now fuzzy to him. He remembered that, and now he would become the hunted. He crouched in a corner, his muscles twitching, and saw him, the master of the hunt, the one with a smile of a fox trap and a tongue like a snare. At dusk, Sophie sat alone outside the farmhouse. She stared at the edge of woods, arms wrapped around herself. She'd stopped denying it. This place was wrong. It was ancient, alive. She saw them, the trees bending slightly even when there was no rustle. She heard voices in the rustle, felt her pulse match of the beat of something deeper, older. The weird. I joined her, crouching by her side. "You all right?" I asked. Sophie didn't answer at first. I used to think things like this were stories, just weird old traditions that we needed to end. But now, I don't know. What if the land remembers? What if it fights back? Behind her the wind howled. No, it spoke. A syllable she didn't understand. Yet somehow, she felt it was her name. That night the redling overlooked the valley, muscles tensed. And there it stood, at the edge of the woods, the weird. A towering shape cloaked in bark and shadow, antlers formed of tangled roots, hollowed eyes staring directly at him. The animals, deer, foxes, birds, even a hare gathered around it like children before an ancient god. And it nodded once. The redling understood. The time of the hunt was near. The farmhouse was still, its walls breathing a quiet, uncomfortable calm. My eyes snapped open with a start, a faint creak of floorboards echoing from downstairs. I rushed down, fearing the worst, finding a door to the makeshift holding room ajar. Sam Bedford had broken free, his restraints torn to shreds, and now was standing over James with a knife in hand. "You'll regret this," Sam spat, eyes wild. "You'll regret everything. The weird will reclaim what's it own." James, already battered and bruised from yesterday, struggled to rise from his chair. His hand grasped for Todd, his son's fox plush, a fragile piece of the past. With a roar, James lunged forward. His shepherd's crook crashed into Sam's ribs, knocking the knife from his hand. I was on Sam in an instant, pinning him to the floor. Nick grabbed the knife, casting a grim look at the cultist. "You're not getting away this time, prick." Sam snarled, twisting in Joe's grip. "The weird is coming. You're all dead. Even the redling." A cold chill ran through the room at the mention of the redling. James glared at Sam, voice low and threatening. "We've had enough of your game, Sam." But Sam was too wild. With a final, desperate thrash, he slipped free, dashing toward the open door. I was quick enough to pulling him back inside, and with some help from Tom, we managed to subdue him again. But this time Sam had given them a parting gift. The truth, twisted and unrelenting. "The weird, you think you've escaped it? It's always watching. It's always there," Sam muttered, his eyes unfocused. "It's in the land, the trees, the stone, the redling." Once Sam was taken care of, we set out into the woods, our feet heavy in the cold morning air. The wind whispered through the trees as if the forest itself was alive, watching their move. James led the way, his hand still clutching the plush fox tightly. He knew Michael was caged, a prisoner to the cult, to the tradition. He was hidden in an ancient stone clearing, the cage rusted and surrounded by tangled ivy and symbols carved deep into the earth. The weird's mark was everywhere here, and it had been for centuries. Darrow and his followers had long since set up camp, and the air was thick with anticipation. The ritual was about to begin. The glade was still, cloaked in pre-dawn shadow. But the hush was brittle, the kind that comes before something breaks. In the clearing stood a cage black iron, shaped like a haunting trap, cruel in its craft. Inside the redling crouched, bare-skinned and filthy, his limbs taut as twisted branches. His eyes, once human, were golden now, bright, alert, and far away all at once. Around him the hunt assembled. Men and women in antique red jackets masked with bone, bark, and boar's tusk. They carried polished horns and hunting crops, boots gleaming even in the dirt. Some on horseback, others with hounds snapping at their heels. Smoke curled from torches burning with a greenish hue. Lord Darrow stepped forward. He stood tall beneath a ceremonial antlered helm, and the hush around him was reverent. His voice, when it came, was cold and commanding. For centuries we have culled the wild. For order, for legacy, for man's divine place over tooth and claw. Today, once more, we will run down the redling and remind the land who holds the leash. Michael's body twisted, contorted. His eyes widened with pain as his form began to change. He groaned, his skin rippling, his fur sprouting along his arms and legs. His teeth elongated, his eyes glowed with a wild, feral hunger. Michael now looked more fox than human. He's ready for the hunt. A masked follower approached the cage. His hands trembled as he turned the key. The cage door creaked open. Michael did not move. A horn blew. The hounds snapped at their leashes, howling in anticipation. And the forest answered. We lay hidden in the brush. The plan was chaos, tripwires, smoke flares, interference, anything to interrupt the ceremony and save Michael. But already it was slipping away. I should have stopped this decades ago, he whispered. Michael, my boy, I should have saved you. Michael ran. Not like a boy, but like a creature forged by thicket and thorn. He darted through the trees, leapt rocks, veered into shadow. The hounds bellowed behind him. Horses thundered. Let the hunt commence, Darrow bellowed. Smoke bombs cracked and hissed. The cult's grotesque trail hunt, blending real scents with old blood, fox piss, and burning herbs. But suddenly something changed. The air shifted. The undergrowth moved. A black fox darted across the path, not away from the hunt, but towards it. Then another. Eventually, what seemed to the entire local fox population kept charging from the woods. And then, everything broke loose. A badger lunged from beneath a hedge and bowled over a hound, soon joined by his family. A fallow deer herd charged at the steeds with antlers lowered like spears of bone and burr. Sparrowhawks, buzzards, kestrels, and tawny owls shrieked and dove, talons flashing. Magpies, crows, rooks, jackdaws, and jays screamed overhead, pecking riders at their heads and at their eyes. A stoat leapt into a boot and bit deep. Mice, rats, voles, weasels, rabbits, hares, a polecat, and even a bloody otter. They all poured from the forest canopy. The little beasts swarm the bootstraps while panicked horses rear. From the branches, squirrels leap onto the heads of the riders, biting at noses and ears. Even more surprising was some of the village's cats and dogs seemed to have joined the natural forces. A murmuration of starlings, wood pigeons, tree sparrows, bullfinches, goldfinches, blue tits, great tits, dunnocks, wrens, and even pipistrelles clouded the forest eaves. A swan tackled a hunter to the ground, beating her into submission with his wings while a heron's eerie cry pierced the woods. The robin from before lands briefly on James's shoulder, then darts into the fray. The hounds, once bloodthirsty, snarling beasts, halted mid-lunge, ears twisting. A low whine shivered through their ranks, a flicker of recognition deep in their amber eyes. Then, as if some ancient memory awoke in their marrow, they turned. With guttural snarls, they wheeled around and threw themselves at their handlers, biting hands that once beaten them, dragging down red-jacketed riders as foxes lunged from the bracken to join them. Screams filled the air, curses swallowed by the thundering cries of jackdaws and buzzards. Deer barreled into fleeing cultists, birds pecked at faces, rabbits and hares tripped running men. Even the stoats and weasels leapt like shadows from the ferns, slashing at ankles with needle teeth. We blinked, stunned even to think that the local ecosystem was fighting back, until Tom yelled, "Don't just stand there like bell ends, help them!" With whoops and howls, we surged forward into the chaos. Sophie snatched a fallen riding crop and swung it at a hunter trying to raise a horn. Nick tackled a masked figure wrestling a barn owl off his shoulder. Tom and two deer leapt aside as a massive branch cracked by smoke and chaos came crashing down, separating the hollow from the path to escape. "No one's leaving," he muttered grimly. "Good." A voice rang out, manic and sharp. "View halloo! Tally-ho!" It was Darrow. His hunting coat torn, eyes wild, he had broken off from the fray and was sprinting uphill, crashing through underbrush with his whip raised high. And ahead of them, leaping half fox, half boy, was Michael. "The redling's mine!" Darrow screamed, voice cracking with unhinged glee. "The blood shall run. The land shall remember." "Shit, James," I shouted. "He's after your boy." James turned like he'd been stabbed. "No! No!" He bolted faster than I had ever seen him move for a man of his age. I followed after him, my heart hammering against my ribcage, dodging low branches, stumbling over exposed roots slick with blood and moss. Behind us, the battlefield howled with fury, but ahead was a sacred terror. The redling's breath burned. His limbs didn't move like they once did. Pads where fingers used to be, claws gripping the wet leaf litter. The world smelled alive, every leaf, every pulse of fear, every whisper of blood. He could hear him behind, the master of the hunt. Darrow. The forest throbbed like a heartbeat around him. Trees shimmered, and shapes danced just beyond the edges of sight. His thoughts tangled. He knew he had been something else, someone once. But it was like trying to remember a dream with cold water poured into your ears. But then something shifted. He had looked back, just once, and seen the twisted mask of Darrow, whip raised, howling the old cries of the hunt. And it wasn't fear he'd felt. It was hatred. Branches tore at their coats. James was bleeding from the temple, but didn't slow. I could barely keep pace, panting, his side burning. "There," James gasped. "Up the ridge." Darrow was gaining on Michael, his coathouse streaked with mud and blood, face white and eyes wide with zealotry. The farmer screamed, "Leave my son alone, you parasite!" Darrow didn't turn. He was shouting again. "Tally-ho! The blood must run!" James surged forward and with a roar tackled Darrow from behind. The two men tumbled down a slope, crashing through the brittle leaves and roots. They grappled. Darrow fought like a man possessed, eyes glowing with fanatic flare. "You don't understand," he spat, wrenching his arm free. "He is the gate. The weird demands it." "You're a monster," James snarled, slamming his fist into Darrow's face. Above them, James staggered to his feet and looked through the trees. There, crouched beneath a thicket of dogwood, panting, eyes wide, was his son. "Michael," James choked, stepping forward. The man before him smelled of earth, sheep, and sorrow. That scent, that voice. "Michael," the man whispering again, kneeling, offering a small toy fox. His fingers trembled. "It's Dad," the man said. A flash, a memory, hands lifting him high. Laughter. Mud pies. Sheepdogs barking. Michael blinked. The forest swam. He stepped forward, then stopped. A voice from him whispered. The weird had arrived. At the tree line, cloaked in a body of vines, antlers, bones, moss, and birdsong, the weird stood. Its face was a shifting tapestry, the fox skull, the owl eyes, bark and starlight. It said nothing, just watched. Michael turned, breath catching. Behind him, foxes and hounds stood together. To his side, James, arm outs, whispered his name. Below, Darrow struggled in the mud as I held him down, teeth gritted. The choice burned in his chest, and the redling remembered who he was. The weird loomed at the forest's edge, half seen, half felt like a storm made flesh and folklore. Its antlered crown shimmered with leaves that moved through there was no wind. The robin nested in the crook of its branches. Owls blinked slow and wide from the hollows of its chest. Darrow broke free from my grasp, bleeding and gasping. He stumbled to his knees before this being. I only did what was needed," he stammered. "I upheld the old rites. The blood, the hunt, it wasn't for me, it was for you." He stretched out a trembling hand. "Master, please, I served you. I kept the pact. The boy was the offering." The weird stared, unmoving. The forest fell silent. Then, slowly, it stepped forward. Darrow whimpered, crawling backwards. No, I'm loyal. I did it for the land. For order. They're the trespassers, not me. The weird reached out and touched him. Darrow screamed. His limbs bent and folded, bones snapping like firewood. His flesh peeled in shifting waves. White fur spilled across his body like snow on stone. His voice shrank to whimpers, paws thrashing in the autumn leaves. Within seconds, Darrow was a white fox, panting, eyes wide with terror. Then came the sounds, padding feet, soft and circling. The black fox stepped from the shadows, regal and grave, eyes gold like ancient amber. It nodded once. Behind it came dozens red foxes, flanking on both sides. And then, from the thickets, the hounds, their loyalty reborn and belonging to the weird, stepping forward without snarling. They didn't lunge. Darrow froze, then, sensing what was happening, fled. The foxes followed. Then the hounds. A hunt in reverse, not to kill but to cast out. A sentence from the woods itself. Darrow vanished into the trees, chased from the hollow, never to return. Michael watched, breath held. James stepped closer. You remember me, don't you? Michael looked down at the toy fox, now muddy in the farmer's hand. Slowly he reached out, clawed, trembling, and took it. A shiver passed through his body. Not of cold, but of memory. He let out a noise, a quiet croaking sound, not quite human, not quite fox. Then he leans forward and rested his head against James's chest. James sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He cradled the boy, whispering, "It's over. You're home." The clearing was littered with broken masks, broken illusions. We stood in silence, bloodied, bruised, but together. Around them, the wildlife slowly withdrew, birds taking to the air, deer vanishing between the trees, small mammals disappearing like shadows. James rose, keeping one arm around Michael. "What happens now?" he asked hoarsely. Nick wiped mud from his brow. "We tell everyone in the village." Tom looked out over the trees. "Will they believe us? The weird has gone." The air had changed. Lighter, older, as if something terrible and sacred had passed. Sophie looked to the tree line where the last foxes had vanished. "Maybe they don't need to," she murmured. "Maybe the land already knows." Epilogue. 1 year later. The hollow is quieter now. No horns, no hounds, no red-coated riders. No children vanished beneath the boughs. There are still whispers, of course. There always will be. Old stories cling to the bones of places like Harlow's Hollow. But the village breathes easier. Gardens bloom fuller. Livestock stay unbothered. Children play at the wood's edge without flinching at shadows. Some say there's a boy walking with foxes at dusk, barefoot, russet-haired, eyes bright and watchful, and with a little plush in his arms. He doesn't speak, but he sometimes leaves feathers, stones, or acorns on doorsteps like gifts. James watched from the porch, mug in hand, always waiting for his son to come home for dinner. Sometimes the boy returns. Sometimes he doesn't. And that's enough. As for me and the other saboteurs, we still speak of the weird quietly, not as a god, not as a monster, but as a reminder that the wild is not forgotten, that the land remembers who treads it and how, and that one day, should cruelty rise again, so too will the forest. Hey family, a very big thank you to huntalex for allowing me to narrate such an awesome tale. Be sure to check out their Reddit profile for more of their awesome works. If you would like to support us and make a donation, I'd be very much appreciative. I do have PayPal and a Buy Me a Coffee account. Be sure to also check out our merch store. There are plenty of items and designs to choose from. If you enjoyed this video, then why not check out the next one? Here, on the right-hand side. You can also follow us. All my socials and all my other links are contained within the Linktree link below. Take care, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.